So hi, I'm Peter Schrappen. Thanks for having me. I want to let you in on a little secret. I've been working on this presentation since 1994 when I was an undergraduate at Northeast Missouri State University, the Harvard of the Midwest. I'm wondering, though, if in Massachusetts they call Harvard the Northeast Missouri State University of Massachusetts. Probably not, but you never know. I've never been to Harvard. But so I'm really excited to be here. Thank you. And I just want to tip my cap to the USSA team for putting together a tremendous conference. It's the second annual one, and thank you for making this a priority in your calendar. So yeah, the art of selling sausage in Washington, that's an ode to, homage to Otto von Bismarck, who said there's two places you never want to go, where they make sausage and where they make laws. So I thought, why not just combine that into one presentation and share with you kind of the tips and tricks I've learned throughout my course of my government affairs political career. But first I want to start with the story. This is the story of sliced bread, the greatest invention since sliced bread. But sliced bread has not always been around. I guess it was probably the greatest invention since the telegraph or whatever before sliced bread came around. Interestingly, this gentleman from Chillicothe, Missouri, invented the sliced bread machine in 1912. But it didn't take off. It took him 25 years until he sold it to Wonder Bread because the problem was he thought his invention would stand on its own. He thought people would just gravitate towards him, and he got so wrapped up in the patent, so wrapped up in the widget, that he never had a campaign plan. He never had any sort of tactics on how he could sell his concept to others. And I think actually that's kind of where we struggle with. I think the most important slide that I have is this one, and I'll explain it. But at the upper left corner, we've got Tammy and Baker and Jim Baker. And I think that slide epitomizes the values that trump relationships, which trump information. Going to undergrad as a political science major, we're taught the opposite. We're taught that, oh, if you have all the information, that's all it takes to succeed, and that is so incorrect. So what I'd like you to do is flip that upside down and think about the values that we can actually overcome and influence, to think about the relationships that we can tap into and cultivate with elected officials because they are just like us. And then thinking about information, probably the most overrated thing out there is information, because if you have the right salesperson selling your idea, you can overcome a lot of weakness. And you all are the right salespeople. No legislator would rather hear from you than from anyone else. The fact that you own or work in a small business is fascinating to them. They don't hear from a lot of real people, but rather they hear from a lot of boring technocrats or staff or fake people. So at this point, I wanted to just have Rick tell a little story about how in the Northwest we've been able to penetrate that values piece with a key elected official at a party that we threw.
We're not the big white yacht. We're the people that work to make, to refit, to service the big white yachts. We're the taxpayers in the local areas in our neighborhood, and we invite our legislators that live in our neighborhood to come and talk to us. Have some sausages, which we make in Washington State. But
so do you want to talk about the Ed Murray event, Rick?
Yeah, the Ed Murray effect.
Yeah.
This is a great deal. We have a new mayor in Seattle. His name's Ed Murray, and he was looking for help, and we said, hey, we're here. Why don't you come to Jensen Motorboat Company, and we'll tell you our story. And we had tradesmen there, and they were talking about their families and the schools that their kids go to, and basically turning us not into the rich guy, but the guys that are working hard every day and supporting the neighborhoods that we live in. So he got it. He's spreading that word around Washington State and the Northwest, and he's our best friend now. So all it took was a beer and hot dog and a story.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. So the fact is that legislators like us are irrational. And like your customers, they're irrational too. This is a picture of Joey Chestnut, who's worth $800,000. He eats hot dogs for a living. He's not even the highest paid hot dog eater, though. That's Kobayashi, who makes $1 million. When we think about legislators, though, let's keep in mind that they're irrational. Let's keep in mind that they aren't thinking about logic like we think about logic. Yes, they have their own set of logic, but it's much more focused on how much campaign dollars they can raise or how many relationships they can cultivate and tap. At USSA, we are creating those relationships, however. We are working with irrational lawmakers, because if they were rational, frankly, we wouldn't have to convince them. We are selling the bread slicer to them on your behalf. So Christy, do you want to say a few words on what we're doing?
Christy Hebert, Wards Marine Electric. I'm not sure if I'm more bothered that Peter gave me the irrational slide or if it's the one with the hot dogs. But my role as the co-chair is I'm just going to be talking about some of the things as it relates to currently U.S. Superyacht. And Peter's right. You know, I can recall there were some of you in this room 2 years ago at the American Boating Congress. We sat down and one of the senior staffers said, have you ever thought about taking the word superyacht out of your group? Because it seriously, you know, it can kind of be a hindrance, and it's hard for us to really want to help you. And we realized, well, you know, we got a little bit of work to do. And in doing so, though, it's been successful. We have been able to meet with legislators, just like Rick was talking about, and let them know that big boats equal big jobs. And the boats coming in, they have choices. These are floating corporations. Yes, they're used recreationally, but thank God for rich people that have these boats. And I'm going to quote our marketing chair back there, which is Mr. Bert Fowles, who did an article and talking about winning the economic lottery. And that's something that we let these legislators know, that you should feel lucky that you have a yacht in your district, that you should feel lucky that there are yachting companies in your district, because those boats require the money. So we're working on the value.
Thanks, Christy. And I had that picture of Kevin Bacon. That's the old 6 degrees of separation. It's actually 2.5 degrees of separation, that we're all connected. So if you're frustrated that you don't have the relationships in Olympia or your state capital around the country, that's fine. We have people who do, and I'm sure you do too, if you can just think about maybe what church they go to or their Democratic Party or Republican Party. When you think about relationships, though, I put them in order of importance, and how if we can just figure out a way within your own community to tap into them. And the easiest, least cost-effective, least time-intensive activity is just donating money. And if you donate over $200 to a candidate, or even $100, they'll sit down with you and they'll have coffee with you, and you can go over your issue with them. And I just would really encourage you to become our sales force to them, because thinking about relationships, I think we're taught that we're the customers of the elected officials. And if we can get away from that, and kind of speaking to what Ron was saying about Westport, if we can become customer-focused and thinking about the legislators as the customers, we're the sales force. We're the ones who are bringing them along to our issues. I think that will lead to a lot less frustration out there. So information certainly does matter. This is the old Bueller. So when does it matter? Great question. Thanks for asking. It matters when we've got non-controversial technical stuff, so the pilotage. Jay, do you want to, I mean, you probably have some experience also going on with the pilotage law that recently changed. Was it a controversial issue for you guys in your state?
It's controversial because we're in the Chesapeake Bay, and we have Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware that all have different pilotage requirements. Some are tougher, some are less stringent, but what we're trying to do is to make all of them the same and make them agreeable to most sizes and types of yachts. Just make it easier for people to come and visit the area and enjoy yachting. So
did you guys reach consensus on that pilotage bill as you worked it in the legislature with the other stakeholders?
Well,
Yep.
we
Leading the witness here, but that's the key.
We wanted to have larger yachts and a deeper draft, but you have to decide what you can sell to the legislators. And so in our case, we sold 200 feet and 12 feet or less of depth. And that does capture about 90% of the boats that we get. So for us, that's a good start. We're going to try to grow from there. But you definitely have to decide, what can you sell? How many sausages can you sell?
Jay, you should come up and give the presentation. That's excellent. And this is unrehearsed. So, and periodically, though, this is what you're going to run into when you are lobbying or advocating or selling your proposition to the legislators, to the lawmakers. It is unbelievable how much information they need to track, how many relationships they have in their proverbial Rolodex. In Washington State alone, when the legislative session kicked off, there were 2,200 pieces of legislation that were introduced in just Washington State. Imagine that. I mean, you are one of 2,200 different brilliant ideas that have a prime sponsor that hopefully have committee hearing meetings. It is darn near impossible for a legislator to keep track of that. So enter USSA at the federal level. We have someone like Duncan Smith. Duncan, I don't think he even got introduced, but Duncan is our lobbyist in DC, who has the relationships, who's able to when you make that contact, actually, literally, your piece of information, your bill comes on top of it. And that's why Duncan is there every day fighting on our behalf. Duncan, did you want to say a few words?
Just that you're right. The information's overwhelming. It's just stacked on their literally on their desks like that. They do have staff to sort it out, but we need to think of ourselves as their staff, them being the customer, and sell them the ideas that we want them to embrace. So that's the way to get through all that paper.
This is probably making sense at this point, and gosh, Peter, I hope there's no wild card. Well, there's a wild card, folks, and that's the most precious resource when you are working your priority, when you are working your piece of legislation, and that's time. You cannot start a bill when the first day of session begins. Well, technically that's how it occurs. You've got to start your priority, your idea, way earlier. If you do what I said not to do, it's like, as my boss likes to say, going Christmas shopping the night before Christmas. Yes, you can do it. Yes, I've done it, but everyone sees right through it. Like, gosh, I never asked for a chia pet, but thanks for another chia pet, Peter. We've already got 10. You need to think about your issue, and you need to work with I'd like you to work with Christy and myself and Duncan. If you have something that's keeping you up at night, if you have a regulation that is frustrating you, you've got us as resources, and I have my contact information at the end, but I am always there, and I love struggling with you because I struggle a lot on my own with stuff, so please use us. And where do irrational people like to hang out? Well, they like to hang out at boat shows, and that's another facet of USSA that you'll find with our membership. And Christy, do you want to speak about the success we've had inviting lawmakers, key lawmakers from both sides of the aisle to our booth and to our events in Fort Lauderdale?
Well, it's key. You know, one of the things that we've done, actually even this coming Palm Beach Boat Show, we're obviously going to have Congresswoman Lois Frankel. We'll probably have Congressman Patrick Murphy, and we've had Congressman Peter Deutsch. They happen to be, you know, part of the district. But the one thing I know that this past Fort Lauderdale show, one of the things that we were talking with legislators as well is, when you look at a booth, that's a business. That's a small business. Each one of those people, they have desks, they have staplers, they have a payroll to make, they have insurance, and they have bills. So when you go to a boat show, while the boats are there, and those are floating companies, go look at the booths, because every 10 by 10 is a business. Count up the employees. And so that's a very significant. On a small anecdote, one of the successes, the Marine Industries Association of South Florida worked with Florida Yacht Brokers Association on this tax cap. And for years, it was, nobody's ever going to have a tax cap. It's not going to be something that's going to be doable. Everybody always said no. And the chair for the finance and tax in the state of Florida came to the boat show. She's come a million times. Went on a Trinity, actually with wheels. And the gentleman had the boat registered in North Carolina, but for 6 months of the year, kept it behind his home. And when the senator went into the boat and looked, and what impressed her the most was the wine. And she said, well, where'd you get all that wine? And they mentioned it was local. And, well, where'd you get this? Well, this is local. And took her through the tour. When she realized, well, why do you leave? He said, well, 6% of $30 million is a lot of money. And I will tell you, that was the start of the legislature understanding we're not trying to give wealthy yacht owners a break. We're trying to create economic impact in our state. So, boat show did it.
Another irrational place is your state capital, and I would also encourage you to go visit your state capital at least once a year and say hi to the staff. You may not meet with the lawmaker, but you can at least meet with the staff. And I hate to say even the word at least, because staff, in my view, are as important, if not more important, than the lawmaker, because they're the ones who are managing the piles that ultimately the elected will vote on. A book that kind of transformed the way I think about it, if you were looking for something to read, I'd really encourage you to pick up To Sell is Human. It talks about how the way that sales in the old days was always be closing. And what we're finding, though, it's a different way to close. And similarly, work in legislation. It's about ABC, but it's attunement. Are you attuned with your customer? Are you buoyant? Are you able to have some resilience when you get no's? And are you using clarity, that C word? And are you able to speak with one voice around a shared message in terms that the legislator understands? So let's just get a little etymology here. What does poly mean? I guess you can see that there. It means many. And the second word, titians, anybody know what titians comes from? No? Blood-sucking animals. So that's what we're dealing with. So keeping that in mind. But awkward if you didn't get it. But what do legislators think of themselves? They see themselves as Princess Di and Mother Teresa. They see themselves as objective. They see themselves as public servants. They see themselves as running for governor. They see themselves as rational, which is part of the trick, and they see themselves as, of course, that they're correct and that they look at it. They've tricked themselves into thinking that they've looked at information to make the best policy decision. So let's talk a little bit about how we're seen by them, and we talked a little bit about this, but this is what we have to overcome, is that we are not the owner, although we depend on the owner, but we are the family-run business that can tell the real story about the struggle that it takes to stay in business after coming out of the Great Recession on an industry that is so centered on discretionary income. as we hold their hand, as we walk them through this, we need to channel our Ann Sullivan. It took her about 3 months to get Helen Keller to see that, to really feel water, because she had that concept. And we are the Ann Sullivans working with the legislators. They are our Helen Keller, if you will. And that's probably the best advice I ever got in lobbying when I started off was starting where they are, not where we are. And that's knowing your audience. I'm sure that's focused, or you have the similar terminology in your own world, but it really is figuring out where they are coming from and thinking about and meditating on it. Like, how are they making the decision? That's the beautiful thing about super yacht issues. They're multifaceted. Lawmakers, the Democrat or Republican, care about tourism. They might care about tourism. They might care about workforce development. They might care about local stuff going on in their district around education. And there's so many different facets to what we're talking about. And it's, again, both sides of the aisle. Sadly, though, we've got other barriers to overcome. We're in a windowless conference room talking about super yacht issues. That is weird. It's great. It's awesome because I think about this stuff morning, noon, and night as well. But realizing that we need to start where they are by not using acronyms, by thinking about issues that they care about, and then really transcending that with our message. This is what we're dealing against. And in your own worlds, this is what you're coming up against too. No one cares about the widget. People don't want email. They want me-mail. They want to know that you're out there kind of beating the drums for them. And I think that's another barrier that we've been able to overcome. Christy, do you want to chime in here about?
Well, the one opportunity a year, and I'm one of those geeks also that thinks we should do it quarterly, is the American Boating Congress. And this is not just something that USSA does. This is something that USSA, and again, we're in acronyms, but the U.S. Superyacht participates with about 40 other marine trades associations. And we all go to D.C. We have opportunity to share the legislative issues that are facing, all different segments of the industry. And then we all, pounce on the hill, so to speak. And meetings are made weeks in advance, and I can allow Duncan to comment on that. But we hit, almost every single, as Martin has mentioned in the past, the ultra high net worth individuals that are representative in 15 states. When you add up all of the House representatives and the senators, it comes to 135 members of Congress. And I will tell you, not only do we meet with all of them as a collective group, but sometimes we're meeting with multiple ones. I know that 2 years ago, Billy Smith even flew in just for a meeting because we knew that the senator would meet with a constituent that he already had a relationship with. And it's a wonderful experience. I encourage you to go, even if you can only go for the afternoon, go for one day. It's May 11th, 12th, and 13th, but it's a really neat opportunity to see all the people in the industry. There end up being about 400 people that go, and part of the end is that all the staff members from all the offices that you have visited come to a reception, and you wouldn't believe the amount of that. And they're all talking about, wow, the boating industry is great and it's interesting, but we do recognize it as jobs and all the same challenges with healthcare or anything else that any other industry has.
Thanks, Christy. Another barrier we have is the curse, what I call the curse of knowledge. It's the fact that, again, we know way too much. Pretend you're talking to a third grader about our issues, and how would you get them to come around on issues that they care about? Granted, it might not be super yachts, but it could be something like you could start lobbying your kid on an issue and see how different leave-behinds would work. It's just a fun exercise. So I just want to share with you another story. This is one of my favorites. It's the story of the lion, the mice, the field mouse, and the antelope. A lion can actually kill a field mouse. Little known fact. But unfortunately, it takes more calories to hunt and trap the field mouse than it gets when it consumes the field mouse. On the other hand, a lion can kill an antelope. It takes a lot more time, a lot more strategy involved, a lot more tactics. But when it finally does kill the antelope, it can feed its pride for weeks on end. Now, you can either die of starvation on the field mouse diet, or you can think about what can we do to go after the antelope, again, in your own world as well. What are you doing to go after the antelope where you can then feed your family for weeks on end? So tracking the antelope, how can we create antelopes in our legislative advocacy world? Priorities and consensus. Nothing is easier than killing a piece of legislation, which oftentimes is most helpful to know that. But do you have a list of priorities? When I started at Northwest Marine Trade Association, we put all of our priorities on a whiteboard. I think, Rick, you might have been at that meeting. We had 25 priorities. That is not a list of priorities. That's just a laundry list. And we were able to survey our members, survey our friends out there on what issues they most cared about. And there's something about the number 3. We went to Olympia with 3 issues that we really cared about, and we got our pilotage bill passed that first year. So I would encourage you to create consensus around your priorities. If you're not on the same page with either the environmental community or other like-minded organizations, it's the default reflex by legislators is to not act. How can you make your legislator, your lawmaker, your best friend? You know, what are they interested in? They're interested in money, frankly, and are you able to host a reception? Are you able to pull together 10 friends and put together a reception? Also, how can you make your staffer your best friend? How can you be customer-focused with that legislator and with the staffer? This is a real-life example of how best friends get more stuff done in the state capitol than not. It's a little difficult to read, but this is one of our champions in Olympia, Representative Gail Tarleton, and I'll just read it. April 23rd, the day that my first bill as a state legislator was signed into law by Governor Jay Inslee, House Bill 1647 fills a gap in the Washington Landlord-Tenant Act and requires landlords to protect tenants, blah, blah, blah. This one started with a phone call from my friend Sue Evans, another friend on Facebook, who's been on my team since 2007 and never stopped believing that legislators are there to fight for the people who have nowhere else to turn, blah, blah, blah. Okay, this happens more often than not. This is the beauty of befriending legislators on Facebook. And yes, they will accept just about any friend request. This is how the stuff gets done, and that's similar to in your own world. Again, speaking about that monomaniac, are you just crazy? Is your hair on fire about one issue that you can turn the tide, then you can go down to your state capitol versus a shotgun approach? Nothing could be more important than speaking with just one voice. Christy, we talked about you chiming in on this one too, yeah.
If you wanted to talk about it, it's about the American Voting Congress. It's just an opportunity that the more we can speak to the legislators in one voice, the better.
And we're working on that on your behalf as well with our issue briefs.
Yes.
Think local, act local. We were able to have a local mayor come to us to the American Voting Congress, pick up the phone. I didn't know him at all, but he has a city, a town on the water. And he loves going to D.C. It's a way to him to have a vacation on our expense. And we took him, and we got every appointment we wanted because we were with just some random small town mayor. It's hard to turn the tide in D.C. That's why we have Duncan on our team. But within your own community, you can really befriend very easily your mayor, your city council member. And again, speaking on that fundraising aspect, if you can just host one party a year for a legislator, developing those antelope, just one antelope is better than none. And I think that's what we struggled with in Washington State. Is at first we didn't really have any antelope pie, but now we certainly do because it's been a drip approach to successful advocacy. Are you getting a little psycho on your legislator? Are you turning yourself into a detective? Are you kind of tracking them on what events they're going to? Do you understand the type of language they like to hear? It's really becoming a detective that has certainly helped our group. And then where do you start? It's very overwhelming. How are we able to just even take that first baby step? And what I would suggest is really getting at the state level, really getting involved with an organization that has a state lobbyist working the doors in your state capitol. You can get involved with them on the committee level. You can help shape their priorities. You can go down to Olympia or your state capitol with the team, with the lobby team. I think that's probably the easiest, best thing to just have to take this baby step approach to successful advocacy.
So the moral of the story is if the new mayor of New York City can attend the all-you-can-eat hot dog eating contest, we certainly can attract our local lawmaker to one of our USSA networking events that Kitty organizes throughout the country. So I would encourage you to do that as well as another idea. So in summation, how did I get here? Where are we going? I just wanted to share with you my 12 commandments. I wasn't a math major, so I think I've got 12. But really the key points here, the only way to mess this up is to not do anything. A crisis is a terrible thing to waste. If you feel like you're being singled out, use that as a galvanizing force to bring in new stakeholders, new members of your coalition. When you have no other options, slow down the process. If you're getting your head handed to you on an awful piece of legislation, create as much drama as possible with as much half-truths and stories as possible that will resonate. I mean, this is theater. Let's face it, what happens in your state capitol is theater. Can you create enough drama to have the legislator take a time out and make the legislator think he or she has to pick sides? Get a win, any win. For us, it was the pilotage bill. It was so gratifying for this organization, for this relatively new committee for NMTA to get a win. That's kind of the first rule of organizing, is to get a win. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. The flip side of that is out of sight, out of mind. I mean, just start annoying your legislator with fun studies, fun articles about our industry. And so eventually, as Rick likes to say, he's not even here, but it's not who you know, but who knows you. Eventually, you're going to get to a point where they're going to be sending you articles They're going to be sending you information. They're going to be coming to you for advice because you've become that expert on not just super yacht issues, but marine trades issues and small business issues. Don't die of starvation from a mouse diet. That's no problem for me. We're there for legislators. Legislators are not there for us. Again, that's one of those tenets I'd want you to flip. We always say, oh, legislators are there for us. Not at all. They are there for themselves. So how can we support them in their role towards, up to running for governor if that's what they aspire to do? Nothing is easier than killing a piece of legislation. I mentioned that one. And then another wild card is, well, if that's not working for you, then it's because politics trumps everything. And that's, again, the beauty of having your advocacy team there, a phone call away, having Duncan there at the doors on your behalf in D.C. So I'd encourage you to reach out to us. I've made available the Northwest Marine Trade Association Government Affairs Plan. We hired a real smart person to bring together our group to develop a campaign political plan for our state, and it's like a Mad Lib. You can plug in your own state. There's no secrets there, and use that plan for your own group, or if you have ideas on how to improve the plan.
Thank you,
I'm all here.
Peter.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Duncan. I should tell you, Christina makes pilgrimages to Washington, D.C. to work with Duncan on your behalf on our issues. And being a Midwestern transplant to the Northwest like Peter, I just want to say thank you. And Peter has never worked on a yacht. He doesn't know how to build a yacht. He doesn't know how to service a yacht. But in the Northwest, he is our most important asset in the marine industry. So thank you very much, Peter.